AI is making everything efficient. But on the flip side, I think that there's this like doubling down on analog and IRL. And I think that there is this world where AI is dominating, but with that, people are really craving the long form.
Hi everyone, it's Alex York. I'm an editor at Forbes, and I am here with Alex Daly, the founder of comms agency Daly. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So you have been part of the under 30 community for a while, and many iterations of your career and your brand and your business has kind of like evolved throughout that time.
Yes.
In today's day and age, can you let me know a little bit about what you're doing, what you're building with Daly?
So Daly's a comms plus agency. So comms is the core of what we do, but that plus is sort of all the other things that really brands need to truly shine. So we do cross-category support for our clients. We do affiliate marketing, we do micro-influencer, we do activations, we do strategy, social consultation, because what we've seen is that for comms today, you kind of have to know all of that and be familiar with it and not really follow the standard playbook in order to pop. It's a very saturated space and people need that support.
Totally. And so much has changed across communication. I mean, even the implementation of like social media, email marketing, PR. There, like you said, there are so many different facets of it. Yeah. What is one sector of communications right now that you feel like startups or brands are really missing or really like need your help with?
Yes. So I think that whenever we go into like a new business call, I have like this gut sense of like, okay, this is going to be a good fit or not a good fit. When brands are coming in and thinking, we want to do this differently. We want to tap into new media. We don't want to just be tapping into legacy media. And I think the brands that are excited, even if it's like a huge corporation, that are excited about where media is going, which I think has changed radically, like even in the last 5 years, that's where we're like, okay, this is where we can have some fun. Versus like the ones that are like, no, there's red tape everywhere. We just want to go to the same tier 1 outlets. If I have to do a lot of convincing of like, your audience might not be the New York Times. It might be this Substack, this very niche community. And if they're like, okay, let's try that out, that's where we have a lot of fun and we can experiment.
I love that. And the future of media is like one of my favorite topics as a journalist and someone who just like consumes media as well. What do you think has been the biggest change over the last like 5 to 10 years in where people are finding content or consuming content or news or, so many things that we're kind of like being bombarded with every day? Where are people turning to right now?
Yes. Well, I think that a few things have happened. I think that there was like a big traumatic change, which you probably felt like during the pandemic. Just there's been so much fragmentation and fluctuation in the media landscape. Newsrooms are shrinking. People are jumping from publication to publication. Some legacy writers are going off and starting their own Substacks, their own newsletters, their own podcasts. And I think that there has been a shift in terms of like trust in traditional institutions, and people are trusting much more individuals. They're trusting creators. They're trusting niche communities, and so I think that that's where it's really shifted. Is that the consumer, the average consumer, is reading what they want to read, where their audience is, where it can all be truncated in one place, and that's what they're trusting the most. So I think that brands, especially when we start to work with a company, we say, if you're kind of looking at the old school sort of siloed approach to media, this is not going to be a good fit. Again, I think it's going to have to be really focused on, do you believe in niche? Because I think niche is power. I think that the people, the creators, I think that's where it's all at.
What about for legacy media? Like at somewhere like Forbes, do we have any hope for the future? Where do you see legacy media kind of coming into play as people are kind of having these evolving thoughts around like where they want to get information from?
Yes, I mean, I think my clients still want to be number one, always want to be on the Forbes of the world. And I think that just you guys doing something like this, like following the journey of a Forbes 30 under 30 and like what they're doing these podcasts, doing these live tapings, really leaning into newsletter digital content. I think that those are the ones that are going to survive and thrive. I also think that Forbes has such an interesting approach to like their contributor model, right? Like you're getting other voices to be contributing and they might not be traditional journalists. And so I think that the the outlets and the media that are leaning into that, that are, New York Magazine launched its own Substack. The ones that are really leaning into, let's kind of get on this train and ride it. I think those are the ones that are going to really survive and like kind of move along with the future of media.
So let's back up a little bit to prior to starting Daly.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about like what you were doing in that phase of your life and
Yes.
how you kind of got into the communication side of thing in the first place?
Yes, it was a non-traditional route. So I worked in magazines, actually. I was a little baby fact checker. And then I worked in documentary film. I majored in film, and I was like, let me give this try of like journalism and film. And that's where documentary came into play. And this was like 2012. And basically there was this shift where documentaries at that point were raising money all through grants and traditional foundations. But then this thing called Kickstarter came about. And we were like, oh, we can go out to the crowd, to our community, and raise money that way. So I started raising money for these documentaries that I was producing through Kickstarter. I got the nickname the Crowdsourceress for my success in crowdfunding. I had no experience in PR. I was just like, okay, I guess you have to create a press release, send it to journalists. I'm going to Google like how to find these journalists. I have to make a video. I have to make a story. And so it was very much grassroots, organic approach to raising money and raising capital. And that really launched my previous agency launched in 2014. And it was a crowdfunding support agency. And we worked with we worked with Neil Young. And that's when I was like, okay, I can do this. We raised like $6 million for him in 30 days. I worked on the Joan Didion documentary. I worked on these amazing reprints of design style guides from the 1970s. I mean, this is the cool thing is that there's always a way through crowdfunding to find your niche community, right? So these publishers came to me and said, we want to make these design books, but these traditional publishers don't want to fund it. So why don't we turn to the community? They raised $1 million for these like really nerdy design books. So that's when I really started understanding the power of the crowd, the power of audience, and really leaning into your early adopters. I must have launched about 100 campaigns. We raised $25 million. I wrote a book called The Crowdsourceress. I became a Forbes 30 under 30. And then we had these clients coming back to us, actually first Neil Young, saying, okay, we have this community. We've raised this money. We got to go make the product. We can't lose these people. We can't lose this interest. And that's when I really learned that you can build momentum, you can build belief, you can build community, but you have to sustain that attention. And so we got brought on to help with PR with post-crowdfunded companies. And I was like, okay, well, my clients need this, so I'm gonna start serving them in this way. And that's how Daly was born, was sort of this like byproduct of my crowdfunding agency with clients that needed our ongoing support to sustain this community that they had built. So I started doing that. That probably happened in about 2018. And then we started having clients come to us and being like, oh, you're that person that raised money on Kickstarter and you raised a lot of money and then you're also doing PR. Can you help us? We've been working with old school agencies. We're not excited about it. So I really used that grassroots approach that I had attached to these crowdfunding campaigns, and I applied them in a longer term capacity for our clients. And that's really how Daly was born.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense when you're talking about the crowdfunding approach to now things like Substack or just more like direct communication channels, that it really is that like finding the niche, finding the, specific like sector of people or community or audience that might relate to what you're selling or what you're trying to share.
Yes.
I'm curious though, in those early days, how did you pick like what projects you worked on? Because those are some like amazing and exciting projects that you got the chance to work on.
Yeah.
What was your decision process like? If this is something that's worth our time and energy, especially in something like crowdfunding that it takes a lot of effort to start generating those campaigns.
Yes.
So what was your thought process behind, this is something I want to bring on?
I think that it was actually a very similar process to how I see and approach Daly when we get a new client. Is this an interesting product? are there going to be people that are interested in it? And it doesn't have to be a massive population, right? Like, who would be interested in this? Who would be excited about this? Okay, we have that checked off. And then I'm going to become so deeply ingrained in like this person's lives for the next 2 months. Like, who do I want to work with? Who am I going to want to like really take on their project as if it's my own? And so there was like this mix of like, do I believe in the product and do I believe in the person? And we actually still apply that to our new business now. It's really like a gut instinct about the idea and about the people behind it.
What do you think? Because I talk with a lot of founders about like raising money and just like kind of generating those kind of early dollars to support their businesses. What is your advice for what route a founder should go down? Like, is it always the crowdfunding route? Is it sometimes like the investor-backed route? How are you thinking about and like advising other people to think about where money comes from?
It's such a good point and question, because another thing that we've launched along the way is I had my first agency for crowdfunding. Now I have Daly. And then in the last year, I launched a venture studio and angel investment fund called Orchard Street. And it really was an extension of like this narrative that I've just mapped out. So my business partner, shout out to Ali Brucci, I love you forever. She and I had been working on this comms plus model for Daly, and we were really like leaning into this idea of how much comms has changed and the ecosystem around it. And we were having clients come to us, and they were very early stage. And we're a bigger company now. We couldn't take them on, and we were like, how can we support these founders on day one? You know, because you have to nail the story on day one. You have to nail your operations. You have to nail your culture. So we thought, how about we create a model of supporting those early founders? And that's how Orchard Street was born. So we do a mix of a small amount of cash, as well as supporting and offering our daily services of comms. We also are a company that really believes in operations and culture. It's like we live and breathe our values, and we want to instill that in early stage founders. So that's my long way of saying that if a founder comes to me, even for advice, and it's like, should I go fundraise? Should I go crowdfund? Blah, blah, blah. I think I will say to them, go find the right partners. They're going to help you build the infrastructure that even if you're a one-person company, that at 30 or 50 or 100, you're able to grow to that size sustainably with a culture intact, and also give yourself the space to make a product that you really believe in. I think that a lot of people they have this idea and they're like, okay, white space, I need to go get the money, I need to go get the investors. And I'm like, just take a beat and focus on building the right thing and building the right product and getting the partners that can help you get there.
So when is the right time, do you think, to start looking for money?
That's such a good question. I would say that after you have some sort of MVP, you have the idea, you've probably on your own sort of used your own sweat equity, your own cash to build the idea, maybe getting a programmer to do that if it's a SaaS product, and then having something that you can show. So you have something that you can present to an investor or to the crowd through crowdfunding. So you have the idea, it's built very like rudimentary, and you have a great deck. I think that's the time you can go raise some money.
And you mentioned there too that like nailing the story from the beginning is so critical.
Yes.
For the companies that are coming to you today, companies across the board, what is your biggest piece of advice for like how to start crafting that story? Because I think that sometimes there's like a founder story, sometimes there's a product story. Like, how do you approach what that conversation and messaging should be?
I think this is so interesting because we went through this era in the last 10 years of like very founder-driven companies, right? And unfortunately, there was like the whole meltdown of like the Girlboss era, and I also think that women weren't set up for success for that. That's a whole other conversation. But I think it's going in and knowing from the beginning if you want to be the face of the company or if you want to have spokespeople to be the face of the company, because it's like a big investment. You know, it's a big investment of your time, your personal space, and so I think knowing that about yourself is really important from the beginning, and then sort of mapping out how you can, craft that story around it.
Because I've noticed that a ton with like founders, especially early stage founders, needing to find an audience or customers growing on social media by sharing their founder story. What do you think works about that approach, and what are some of the like either challenges or things that you would advise people to think about before putting themselves on like TikTok or Instagram with like a day in my life as a founder?
Yes, which is like a big thing. Like, and
I watch them.
Yeah, you're like, I'm scrolling through. There we are on LinkedIn. Yeah, I think that there is something special about those founders that put themselves out there. I think that we talked earlier about this distrust in traditional institutions. I think with that, people don't really trust like this super polished corporate messaging. They really trust honest founders that put themselves out there. And that's what you fall in love with. Like that's like going back to the crowdfunding, like the video, I'm always like, put yourself in the video because we're going to fall in love with you. And that's what we're going to put money behind. That's what we're going to invest in, right? So I think when it's that early, having a face of the brand, whether it is the founder or your co-founder or like an ambassador, I think that that's how you get people to buy into the product is through the person. There was this amazing interview on the cutting room floor with Steve Madden where he was, and I mean, obviously he is so far beyond an early stage founder, but there was like this grittiness and this honesty and this rawness to him that I think people really bought into. And so I think now more than ever, because of that distrust and that fragmentation in media and in traditional institutions, people are going to want to cling on to the person and the authenticity out of that person.
Yeah, I listened to that podcast as well, and I listened to that episode, and I think it really does speak to, like, people then had a connection with him, and even in the comments, like, I'm going to go buy another pair of Steve Madden shoes now.
Yes.
Where do you think, though, is the line between being authentic and, like, maybe sharing too much about the business or not wanting to share, I don't know, maybe too many of the challenges or, like, the difficult parts with running a business? Like, is there a line where you maybe shouldn't cross when you are trying to raise money and bring investors on? What do you think about that?
I think that there is a line. I think that sometimes if a founder's out there too much, you start to wonder as the consumer, are they working on the thing?
Yeah.
Are they making the product? Are they heads down? Are they serious about this? So I think that there needs to be an approach that's authentic and honest and human, but also there needs to be structure around it, right? Even if you're like, I'm going to do this once a week. And I'm going to do it on Tuesdays, and I'm going to post on Tuesdays. And in really creating that structure, I think that there will be a trust in the consistency you put out there. And also that gives you time to like go back and focus on making the thing, which is like really important too.
We've talked, and in this conversation, I've been kind of alluding to like the Instagram reels or the TikToks, video stuff. But as you mentioned earlier, there are so many different mediums to like make this connection with your audience. What other mediums are working today? You mentioned Substack earlier. Like, how are you advising people to find these different niche audiences?
I mean, Substack is a client, transparently, of Daly, so I'm like a big fan. But even objectively, I think that platform is just doing incredible things in terms of, it's very actually similar to what I think Kickstarter was doing in the early days of providing this non-traditional platform for people to tap into the crowd and into the community. I mean, Substack's doing that right now. They're becoming like an amazing cultural institution that everybody is really trusting. And so I think that Substacks, I think newsletters, I think podcasts are such a wonderful way to create that consistency, like I just talked about, to create that trust, to create that relationship. And also these tools like a Substack, they've really built in sort of fan engagement and social media in themselves, like putting Substack notes or posting. So I think that also goes a really long way of creating that consistency.
How important is like growing on these platforms versus like having a consistent output on these platforms?
Yes, I actually think what's great about these platforms is that you don't need to have like 1 million followers.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a lot more about who the followers are, how much they're engaging, what the engagement rate is. That makes so much more of an impact.
And in terms of places like Substack or newsletter platforms, what types of messaging do you think works there? Like, is it the same type of stuff that works on traditional social media? Is it different types of conversations, or what's working? What's generating that, like you said, user feedback and engagement?
I think it's about, if you're a creator and you're either you came from traditional media or you're just somebody that believes in something, people are going to read into that authenticity. Again, I know I've been using that word a lot, but like, start something that you really believe in. Like, start writing about something that you really believe in. It could be about food. It could be about music. With Orchard Street, we have our own little Substack called Cherry on Top. And Orchard Street is all about funding companies at the intersection of workplace and community. So for Cherry on Top, we're just writing about that stuff because that's what we care about. Like, my business partner and I really care about culture. We really care about the future of work. So that's what we're going to focus on. And then you're going to get followers and engaged early adopters that care about that specific thing. And so don't go on there trying to be an expert in something you don't care about. I think it's really going on there and just starting with like what you care about.
I think it also brings up the conversation of, we've been told that like long form doesn't work. People are wanting very like quick hits, 30-second or less clips on social media. But Substack is really a reversion back to long form reading. How are you seeing that impact like the way that people are able to engage? Are people willing to sit there for, 10 minutes to read a post, or how has that conversation shaped up in your mind?
Well, I think that goes back to like, I remember in my 20s where I was like, I'm going to get my New Yorker every week and I'm going to sit on the subway and I'm going to read the whole thing. Gosh, I'm like, need to do that again. But I think that people have created that connection with their newsletters or the creators that they believe in. And that can be on Instagram, that can be on TikTok or whatever, that you take time out of your day to hear what this source has to say to you. And so I think that whatever that medium is, creating that trust and that engagement is like the most important thing. And so people will sit down, and if there's a daily newsletter that they're getting or a podcast they're listening to, they will carve out time in their day because they're excited to do that because they want to make that investment.
And I have talked to quite a few creators that do say like long form is coming back. It's making a comeback. But sometimes that means like 2 minutes instead of 30 seconds. So I do wonder like where the threshold is of how long someone will sit with a piece of content.
Yes, I think it's in flux. I was actually talking to a client this morning about how, and this is sort of analogous, but AI is making everything efficient, optimize. But on the flip side, I think that there's this like doubling down on analog and IRL, people getting together for dinner, people going back to books, like the physical thing, or like journaling. And I think that there is this world where AI is dominating, but with that, people are really craving the long form. They're really creating like personal space to like sit with a book or something like that. So I think that those two things can live together.
Do you have any favorite Substacks that you follow?
Ooh, I love As Seen On.
Okay.
I read that religiously. Achuko is amazing. I love Casey Lewis's After School. She is such a sharp mind. I feel like those are the two that I'm like always like, I'm going to read that.
Yes, I read After School as well, and I have for many years. I feel like it gives me like inspiration about covering young people, which is what my job is as well.
Yes.
I want to know, we've been talking about all these sorts of things that you have helped clients achieve or think about. How are you thinking about all these things as a founder, especially, when we talk about in-person events or workplace? Like, let's start with the in-person events, or just like bringing people together, both for your clients and also for yourself. Like, what do those in-person interactions look like for you?
Well, like one of our goals for 2026 is really doubling down on IRL. Like, I think that people want to have that connection. I think people are excited about it. And we're advising clients, we're like, you don't need a stunt. You don't need to like take over Times Square. That's going to be a flash in the pan that's going to go away, and it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's get a group of people together in a private room for a really great meal to talk about something interesting. And I find that has this deep connection that people are really yearning for, but just like higher impact. You get, again, like getting the right people, talking to the right voices, and getting them in the same room has such higher returns than just like throwing something big out there and doing a stunt for the sake of doing a stunt.
What is the ROI though for those things? Because it's not always necessarily a sale of a product
Right.
then. So how are you talking about like what that impact is in a practical lens for business owners?
I think that just like the whole idea of comms and earned media is brand awareness, right? We really pride ourselves on being a deliverables driven agency, right? We're not going to just say like, you're just paying us to pitch. No, we really put in a lot of work of like, what is the ROI? And I think that it's a much better investment to pay $5,000 to $10,000 for an event than $100,000 because you're creating that intimacy, you're creating that in-person connection. And I think that people remember that so much more. And even them remembering it and being like, oh, Daly just did that thing. That was really cool. And then you see we do something else, an in-person thing. Oh, Daly did that again. You want to just be front of mind for people. You're not going to get a direct sale immediately, but you will get something over a period of time. And I think that's the difference, for example, between paid media and earned media.
You have talked a lot about like building that culture for clients in those in-person events, but also a few moments ago, you mentioned that like the workplace culture is also something that's top of mind for you. How have you, because I know that Daly does things a little bit differently in terms of like hours worked every week and just like how you're kind of facilitating this. What are you kind of like shaking up about the workplace right now?
Yeah, so I would say that we scaled a lot right after we launched Daly because people were like, oh, you're like this new type of agency, right? And then like the pandemic happened and it's like record scratch, like, okay. Everything changed, right? We went fully remote. People were slashing marketing budgets. And so Allie and I, my business partner and I were like, let's go back to the drawing board and create a company that we love to work at and that we have a team that like loves working there. So we really started thinking about scaling impact and like happiness over revenue, and with that, you just have to get creative with like the culture that you're creating. So we were like, let's create a culture that is uniquely Daly's, that nobody else is doing, and because we're lean and small and different, we can make that experimentation. We can do things differently. So we did the 32-hour work week, which was very challenging because as a service company, you kind of always have to be available around the clock for your clients. But we trimmed hours throughout the week so that it didn't really impact our clients, but it made a positive impact for our team. So we have a shortened work week. We have like really robust PTO, fully remote team. And we've actually onboarded everyone remotely, which is amazing because we have, for a 12-person team, we have like an 100-page operations manual. So somebody comes and joins, we're like, here you go, here are your training checklists. We're going to be next to you remotely along the whole way, and we're going to set you up for success. And so I think that remote onboarding and that operations-minded sort of approach has really set us up for success as well. We live by our values: intimacy, pivoting, urgency, and transparency. We use the words all the time internally and with our clients. Because we're remote, we mostly work on East Coast hours, but we have people that are in the West Coast. We have someone, I think, who's in Chile right now. She's our resident digital nomad. But we also have a work from wherever you want week. So like if you want to go to Fiji for a week and work on Fiji hours, figure it out with your clients and you can do that. We also have a biannual profit sharing. So with that idea of like scaling impact and not revenue, we really leaned into like, how can we be the most profitable company? Let's like expand our margins. Let's be really thoughtful about how we spend and how we do things. And with that, twice a year, if we have a great profit, we give that back to the team and distribute it amongst the team. So these are all very like modern approaches to culture, but we are thriving, we're super successful, and it's because we're leading with like an abundance mindset, and it's gone like such a long way with the team.
Are there any sacrifices, especially in order to, adjust margins to be the most profitable? Are there any sacrifices that you guys have had to make?
I think that's a great question. I actually don't think so, because we've created the framework that, going back to those early years of like, what's the product and who are the people, we also have to make sure that like they also have the budget to sustain working with us, because we pay really great salaries and we have the profit share. But I think that if you go in as a founder with a mindset of abundance and not scarcity, which is really hard to have. I'm not saying that, I'm like, that's an easy thing to say. We've been through really tough times. We survived a pandemic, a potential recession. There were tariffs last year. But if you keep on leaning in with culture and abundance, you can make great money, be sustainable, and also have a great culture.
In terms of this in-person stuff that you're suggesting for a lot of clients, but a remote workforce, how are you making that work when people are all over the place, knowing that you want to have a lot of these in-person experiences?
Great question. So I would say a handful of our team is like on the Northeast. So a lot of our get-togethers are in New York. I think that media is all here, obviously. I'm based in Miami. I try to come to New York about once a month for 1 to 2 days. And we make it work, and I think that if you, again, have structure around it, you can make it happen. And then it becomes sort of a joy. Like we have a colleague in Austin. She's going to fly into New York. We have myself in Miami, my business partners in LA, and it becomes a treat to come to New York and host a dinner and then go back home, So it's like the best of both worlds.
What have been some of your favorite like campaigns or projects or events, activations that you guys have put on over the last couple of years?
Ooh, that's a good question. So leaning into these dinners have been really, really fun. Finding a great spot where we know people want to check out, renting out a room, figuring out the perfect playlist, having the best merch. We've done that for like a handful of clients, from like early stage clients to like big corporations, and it's always been really successful. We had this amazing event with Substack, which you came to, which was a mix of new media and legacy media, which we're actually going to replicate this year and do more with Substack and some other clients, because I don't think that there needs to be friction between these media, right? I think that new media is just as obsessed with legacy media and the other way around. And I think that there's plenty of space to like share these platforms and share audiences. So I think it's about bringing these communities together to support each other.
Looking towards the future, a couple of things I want to touch on is like, what is a prediction or a trend that you're seeing right now that you feel like is going to continue to emerge in the crowdsourcing or the funding side of things? And then I'll ask the same thing about the media industry, but let's start with like the money side of things first. Where is this going? How is this taking shape right now?
Well, I think that the funding side of things, I still think that there's a really amazing approach that sort of sits in the crowdfunding world of like those micro payments. I mean, you see that with Patreon, you see that with paid subscriptions like a Substack. And I think that sort of like smaller investments over time, those micro investments, lead to something really large. And at the same time, you're building a community. So I think that that's going to be there forever. And I think it's going to take like many different forms, but it's going to exist for a long time. And I think that also sits in like the angel investment side of things. It's smaller checks, but then you can really create those connections with those angels and sort of have that long-term relationship with them as well.
And then on the media front, where do you see that going? And I ask, especially because earlier you mentioned that like journalists are going to these independent platforms, building their own thing, but at the same time, oftentimes that is paid for. And I wonder how many consumers are going to want to continue to pay for these things when third-party platforms, besides legacy and these independent things like Instagram, like TikTok, there's information for free. How is this all going to shape up within the next couple of years?
I'm seeing that legacy media as well there's paywalls and they're charging. And and obviously there's newsletters that are also charging and podcasts that are charging. And I think that is only going to continue to grow. And I do think consumers, I have to believe that they're discerning enough that they do need to put money and support behind something that they are reading every day, that they're ingesting every day, because with that, the stakes are a little higher, right? I'm putting money towards something that like a New York Times subscription, towards a Forbes subscription, towards this Substack I believe in. I'm going to want to read it more. I'm more invested, right? And I think that goes back to the trust. That goes back to the authenticity, and like that power is like it has to be between these two people.
Mm-hmm. Last question for you. Obviously, with the communications industry, so much of it is based on like authenticity, direct communication, but things like technology, it's not, it can't avoid it.
Yeah.
How do you think AI is going to impact you and your career and your clients and the brands that they're building moving forward?
I think that being scared of AI is not the best approach. It's happening. It's taking over. It's amazing. It's kind of like the people that when the early internet came, oh no, like this crazy thing, the internet, like the ones that embraced it, I think really thrived. And so at Daly, we believe in the power of AI. We use ChatGPT and Claude. We use it because we think it's helpful, but it's never the final draft. I think if anything, it's helping us become a little bit more efficient and allowing us to have more space for strategy and creativity, because AI will never replace humans, but I think it augments and it supports. We actually, even like in the last 2 years, we saw this shift happening with AI, and we created in our operations manual the ethical way of using it. So it was sort of like, if you want to use this, it's never the draft you send to clients. It's never the draft that you send to your manager. It's always a starting point, or if you're stuck. But it's never something that you use as the final point. It's just something to help you, maybe nudge you to get there. So we embrace it with those sort of ethical guardrails around it. And I think it's only going to help, even more and more over time if it's used in the right way.
And as you mentioned earlier too, like it's making so many things more efficient, faster.
Yes.
So maybe it's giving us time to like read a newsletter or a
Yes.
book or listen to a long form podcast.
Yes. And you asked earlier about if like really focusing on profitability has been a detriment to Daly. And I think tools like AI have allowed us to be a little bit more efficient with our time, so we can manage more, right? And become more profitable sustainably.
Totally. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for joining me today. So fun to talk about the future of all these things. It's something that, like I said, I think about all the time. So I appreciate you sharing your thoughts as well.
Thank you for the conversation. It was so fun.